Welcome to another astrological podcast. And in this podcast, I want to talk about uh, the meaning of Pluto in the natal chart. Um, as is typical, I'm going to do a deep psychological dive into the nature of Pluto. It will be a short podcast, relatively speaking, because there is. I'm just going to get straight to the point with what Pluto really is, and in so doing, I'm going to read off one of my articles which I wrote a few years ago regarding the nature of Pluto. I wrote it for an astrological group on Facebook. Um, so what Pluto is your repressed sexual desire, and the reason why it is repressed is because uh, as human beings we have evolved into creatures that are closer to the sun. The sun in the natal chart represents our self-awareness, our self-consciousness. Pluto remains in the farthest reaches of the solar system. So it remains within the farthest reaches of our psyche. You know, what I want you, when you're thinking astrologically, when you're looking at the solar system, you're looking at the nature of self-consciousness as it developed on this planet Earth, with one sun, one moon, and then the orbs spinning around. You're not looking at the solar system, even though that's what you're looking at through your eyes when you look at the diagrams of the solar system. No, what you're looking at is the nature of self-awareness. Okay, you can take some time and try to reconcile that to your worldview. When you're looking at when you see an image of the solar system, or there are very few images of what the actual solar system looks like because no one has really had a vantage point to be able to see what the solar system looks like. At least no one that we know of. So what we have are conceptual models, just artist impressions of what the solar system should look like. You see, but there are a few simulations now that purports to accurately depict what the solar system looks like as over time, as it's evolving through time. The sun is rotating around, it's also revolving around the galaxy, and the planets are in an ecliptic plane, a single plane around the sun. So as the sun rotates, it rotates those planets, but those planets are also rotating on their own axis, and they're also revolving around the sun. So it's a complex motion that eventually results, you see. But that is the nature of self-awareness as emanated on this planet. So on the farthest reaches of the solar system, you have the trans-Neptunian objects, of which Pluto is the lead. And all of these trans-Neptunian objects are related to the distance between these aspects of our consciousness and their distance from the sun. Because the sun is the focal point. The sun is basically our conscious awareness. So it helps us to organize our reality. It is the process by which we bring attention into our life. And that attention, the sense of I which we construct, that is the nature of the sun. That's the nature of our self-awareness. That's why the sun is represented astrologically with a circle, with a dot in the middle. The dot is the process of bringing focus to a point. Now, so Pluto has to deal with those aspects of our psyche that are very distant from our focal point, meaning they're not energies, they're not even though somehow in some remote way our consciousness controls Pluto, but we're not conscious of the way that we control Pluto. So that's why astrologically we say that trans-Neptune, even trans-Saturnian energies, psychic energies, are not amenable by the ego. You basically respond to them whether you want to or not, because you cannot really wield them. And that's because of their slow motion. A lot of people have these energies dispersed within them, so they are intergenerational energies, you see. So you can't really, but the truth is everyone has Pluto in their natal chart. Everyone has the trans-Saturnian planets in their natal chart. So everyone has this, you see. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right in and tell you precisely what Pluto is. And the title of this article, which I wrote, is The Implications of Disowned Sexual Desire, because that's what Pluto is. Now, here goes. Pluto is suppressed sexual desire looking for release. Astrologically, this tiny trans-Neptunian world conjures up so much fear and dread, and the very mention by an astrologer of a pending Pluto transit especially through one of the four angles of the natal chart, or contact with a personal planet, literally means a preparation for death of some kind. So, commentary. Yes, I will be interjecting commentaries in just to clarify what it is that I'm reading and give some more insight. Yeah. So, Pluto is suppressed sexual desire looking for release. That's really what it is, because deep within our psyche, where Pluto resides, we are instinctual beings. We're not driven by reason per se. We want what we want. We are like not even toddlers, because toddlers actually, we're very instinctual. Pluto is an instinct that is just very sexual. It wants to just connect and mate. No formalities, no process. So it tends to, it tends to manifest as an intense, obsessive, compulsive desire that we have no control over. That eventually we have to learn to control. Those trans-Neptunian objects. The process of maturity is the process of pushing all of these psychic impulses to the background of our consciousness, where they are suppressed. Okay. Now, it is not healthy to suppress a desire, especially desires as strong as Pluto. So what we need to do, the way we need to organize our lives, is that we need to find constructive outlets for the light of the sun to penetrate into these areas, thereby bringing them into reason so as to resolve whatever it is that is buried down there. We as human beings, yes, we may have, as we grow up, we tend to suppress some things, but we need to periodically clear the basement of the clutter, you see? And that's what the transits and the progressions bring. So going forward, yes, there is no way to sugarcoat it. Pluto brings death, but rarely or almost never the death of a physical body. However, Pluto always means the death of our pretentious, naive selves with regards to our unacknowledged sexual desires. It doesn't matter in which house Pluto is placed in a natal chart. What it brings to the chart is always the same. It breaks down this pretender to reveal a more authentic you, grown up enough to accept all your own sexual hang-ups. The one thing I have never seen mentioned in most texts on Pluto is that this authentic self, once revealed by Pluto, must face Saturn as the reality gatekeeper. Failure to get past Saturn can have nasty consequences. Commentary. And that's what I'm talking about. You see, there's a reason why these objects are called trans-Neptunian objects, because the gatekeeper for our reality field, our reality experience as human beings with self-awareness is Saturn. If you want to call it a coincidence, Saturn has rings around it, you see, indicating some type of boundary. It is also the furthest planet that can be seen with the unaided eye. I mean, if you want to think these are coincidences, it's up to you. But remember, what I've told you is that when you're looking at the solar system, you are not looking at a thing out there per se. You're looking at the nature of self-awareness as it originates in this aspect of the Milky Way. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at yourself. Or you're looking at the mechanics of yourself. So Saturn is the reality gatekeeper, and that is why Saturn is often linked to the establishment, the structures that emerge over time, you see. So before the impulses from Pluto can get to the sun, they must negotiate with the gatekeeper, which is Saturn. Because if they are not accepted by Saturn, then they are discarded. That means a tug of war ensues, and the war is usually involves the energy of Pluto and Saturn in one way or the other, and the effect as it plays out in consciousness is, let me put it this way, a hardening and a shrinking that increases over time. So you feel like you're being squeezed as things degrade around you. That's really what it is, because that's what's going on in your psyche. So there is a battle going on in there between the impulses from what you consider to be your lower nature that is unaccepted and the gatekeeper, the bouncer. Okay? And if you think these are, you know, light energies or energies to be taken, these are not, these are extreme, these are critical periods in the life of a person when these two energies come together to negotiate. Okay, moving on. Astronomically, Pluto was discovered in the 1930s and is so far away that light signals from the sun take 5.5 hours to reach it. It is the 10th most massive object in the solar system and has been declassified as a planet due to the existence of many similar-sized bodies orbiting the Sun past Neptune. The first detailed pictures of Pluto made big news when the New Horizons spacecraft beamed back detailed colored pictures in 2016. This was the first time the light of our solar awareness had truly pierced the dark realms of this underworld ruler, as the Voyager flyby pictures provided no real clarity. This appeared a purely scientific expedition. However, I am hesitant to draw this conclusion because Pluto is currently in transit through Capricorn. You will do well to research events the last time this happened, some 280 years ago. There may be a less than scientific reason why the powers that be felt obliged to mount an expedition to Pluto at this time. New Horizons was launched in January 2006 when Pluto was at 25 degrees Sagittarius. It arrived Pluto in July 2015 when Pluto was firmly in Capricorn. For all our sake, it is important for the light of reason to keep a close eye on Pluto as it transits Capricorn. Now, this article was written in 2018 because Pluto transiting Capricorn is going to change the world. By the time Pluto is ready to leave Capricorn in probably 2031 or there, it's going to retrograde. Well, anyway, within the next few years, Pluto leaves Capricorn. You will be hard pressed to find. By the time Pluto ingresses into transit into Aquarius, you'd look back at Pluto through Capricorn and realize that this was a momentous period in human history because the change now is global. It's not just because what is Pluto? Pluto is literally this aspect of ourselves that is suppressed. We have created the devil and we've tagged him on that because and we have all things dark and taboo. We have basically created myths around things that are dark and taboo and not to be looked at and all that. And this is something that's playing out in all our psyche. I mean, you can look at racism is one thing. All black people are treated very differently across the world. This is the energy of Pluto that is suppressed. You see? It's the power of darkness or the power of blackness that is just disintegrated from human nature. That's why you normally find people saying, black people appear very sexual and all that. It's nonsense. It is the psyche, it is the nature or the distortion within the solar mind in this era of human consciousness that is leading to all those type of distortions, those type of conclusions. Pluto is just like any other planet out there. It's an aspect of our consciousness that needs to be integrated. In this era, it has been ostracized to a sense because the nature of blackness and the nature of darkness is not understood. It is thought as something to be feared and something that is evil. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is the power of regeneration. It is the power of without it, things would just stale away and die off, never to return. The Pluto is what ensures that when something is not fit for purpose, it is recycled, including within the psyche. So if you have lots of baggage in your psyche, things that you no longer need for your evolutionary growth, or things that you no longer, Pluto is the healer there. It heals through the process of catharsis, and it heals by getting rid of everything that you don't need anymore, disintegrating them, allowing you to build a more authentic self. And authenticity always revolves around your sexuality and your attitude towards it. You have to come to terms with what you are sexually and then become comfortable with it. It's a process of acceptance. That's really what it is. Moving on. Psychologically, Pluto is raw, unadulterated, and extremely potent sexual desire. Its origin is so deep within the human psyche that societal conditioning has meant some degree of detachment from Pluto within our solar consciousness. In most healthy, functioning human adults, Pluto is buried so deep that its whereabouts are unknown, that is, until it contacts an inner planet through transit or progression. The best analogy I have found to explain that part of us that is Plutonic is the alter ego of Dr. Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk. This fictional comic character was created in 1962 by Stan Lee and John Kirby. Anyone who has enjoyed watching the Marvel film productions will no doubt have come across the character of the Incredible Hulk. He is a being of so much raw power, driven by salacious desire and rage, yet his internal motivations are as simplistic as that of a child's. He wants to be acknowledged as a being in his own right, not an alter ego. Our internal Pluto is similar. It is that part of our psyche that needs to be acknowledged in its own right. It will not accept being a psychological dark alley where all our suppressed and unfulfilled sexual desires go to fester and rot. I understand that we must necessarily suppress this aspect of ourselves if we are to engage meaningfully with Saturn's dictates in our lives. Because if we do not, we are effectively excluded from Saturn's realm. Commentary. Now, it goes back to what I was talking about. Now, I'm not saying that we should all become raging sexual monsters and all that. No. What I'm saying is that we should not have taboos around what our true sexual nature is. Now, your true sexual nature is not just where Pluto is in the chart. It's in the overall makeup of your natal chart. Because Pluto is not alone. It integrates with everything else, showing you the consequences of your behavior, helping you to understand what is expected of you. And most people might think, but what do you mean, what is expected of me? Yes, there is always an expectation. We don't just come here because we stumbled into whatever. No, we are born into circumstances that we did not choose and we really cannot control. The very ideas that develop in our heads as toddlers is linked and tied to that environment that we're born into. Not only after a few years, maybe 20 something years, some people even 30 or 40, do we begin to have the sense of self that can enable us detach from the environments that we are born into. You see? And that's a different level of growth entirely, because that takes real courage. That takes a real level, a very high level of self-awareness to be able to say, you know what, I was born into this, I was like this, but I choose not to be like this. Okay? It's not about suppression then, it's about an acknowledgement that this is who I am, you see? But I can choose not to respond to some parts of my nature, even though I don't deny their existence. They're there, but I just choose not to. Okay? And that is what is being asked of us. Not to suppress who we are with lies and falsehoods, because then we give Pluto material for something that he needs to destroy. And if our ego is tied to those falsehoods, then that becomes a very painful period of realizations, And some of these transformations can be extremely painful for the ego, because what Pluto does is to attack the sun. That's what it does. It just strips the ego of all its pretentious nature and reduces it to nothing. You see? And it's not just the sun. Any planet that it contacts, it could be Venus, it could be Mars. Whatever it touches, it accentuates to the point of monstrosity so that the individual can actually understand what it is that they are and then self-regulate. So, for instance, if Pluto touches your Mars in a type of conjunction or a square, then you dealing with your aggressive nature, your ability to use force, and then you throw that into excess and it destroys you. And in the process of that destruction, you realize that this is not who you really are. You didn't want to bring destruction, rather you want to be accepted. That's really what you want. You want to be accepted by others. You want to be able to stand up for you. You want to be recognized as an individual with wants and needs in your own right. You see? And that happens when Pluto literally destroys Mars so that you're powerless. And then from there, you begin to rebuild in a more authentic form. It's the same thing with Venus. When Pluto has a contact with Venus, Venus goes, it brings some type of obsession into the Venusian quality. And this drives Venus mad. It could come in the form of an internal desire, or it could come in the form of a partner that you're obsessing over. You see? Moving on. The solution is to acknowledge this suppressed aspect of ourselves and allow it monitored, periodic, and healthy creative release in the lives we choose to lead. A mighty river properly dammed can provide electrical power to entire regions, but if mishandled, can lead to devastation of an equal magnitude. Pluto and Saturn behave this way because, mythologically, Pluto was a child of Saturn and was partly responsible for Saturn's eventual dethronement. When Saturn's realm was divided through lots after he was deposed, the underworld fell to Pluto. Pluto, Jupiter, and Neptune were directly responsible for the dethronement of Saturn. Within the human psyche, Pluto, once triggered by transit or progression, is an unstoppable force representing the empowerment of collectively suppressed desires and the frustration that leads to change. Individually, it shows up libidinally as the sexual urge to penetrate to the very roots of existence itself, in search of union with divinity and the true being behind the material body. It is our sexual potency that lies coiled up like a serpent within us. It shows up as inscrutable poise and a sense of holding back great emotional passion. The libidinal energy of humankind is one of the most potent psychic expressions possible, representing the ability to explore the entire spectrum of mystical experience. It is psychic energy that must be released periodically, else it will destroy the individual. Pluto is a collective and potent desire. It cannot be handled individually. Any attempt to do so invariably leads to a warped sense of victimhood, selfishness, manipulation, cruelty, destruction, crisis, and renewal. There is another way. The energy of Pluto must be periodically released from its location in the natal chart, and usually its manifestations show up in three different ways. Firstly, a career activity which puts Pluto in contact with emotional intensity, risk-taking, extreme compassion, research, or healing. Secondly, treachery, revenge, cunning, and manipulation of the worst kind. Thirdly, through sex, both of the controlled and uncontrolled type. The fact is that one way or another, Plutonic energy cannot stay buried forever. You either bring it to the light, or it will force its way into the light without your consent. As destructive as Pluto's effects can be, it can also be powerfully creative. Pluto is responsible for forced growth, the kind that does not require the active participation of the solar self. Unacknowledged, it answers to no one. It does not knock on any door, and it entertains no queries about its actions once triggered. It is unbridled and unprincipled power, whose constant effects need to be dissipated and sublimated periodically, or it erupts in a show of unrivaled destructive capability. Ascendants with strong Pluto contacts in natal chart angles, or personal planets, or houses ruled by Pluto, need very quickly settle the issue of their sexual desires early on in their life experience. They must accept and become comfortable with the nature of their sexual desires. This acceptance will mitigate the destructive elements of Pluto and periodically force this serpent energy into the light of the solar focus for continual integration. Such individuals are immediately empowered by this integration. Everywhere they go, they are a force to be reckoned with because they intuitively understand the hypnotic nature or the hypnotic allure of called serpent power. They make excellent seducers, negotiators, detectives, researchers, healers, military personnel, and all activities that require intensity, courage, and subtlety. Commentary. Now, this, reading this, it may sound like, oh, damn, this is incredible. You're telling me to be dark and heavy-handed. No, no, no. I'm not saying anything like that. What I'm saying is that whether you acknowledge it or not, everyone has Pluto in one way or another, and Pluto is making aspects. Everyone has the potential for this obsessive compulsive behavior. What I'm saying is that the healing of society requires us to be able to acknowledge this aspect of ourselves, bring it into the light of reason, the light of consciousness, close to the sun, so that by acknowledging this, we can dissipate it. Because it is the suppression of the Plutonic energy that is responsible for racism, especially anti-Black racism. It is a repression of the sexual energy, or there's something affecting the collective sexual energy that hasn't been dealt with, and so has been considered taboo and suppressed. And then because it is suppressed, it has festered in there, it has rotted, poisoning the psyche, and then it erupts as a taboo towards everything that is black and darkness in general. That's what it really is. This isn't rocket science, it's just human psychology. Okay, and astrology is simply a language for human psychology. It's just a tool for analyzing the psyche. It was developed by very clever people. I don't think these people were primitive people at all. But it's just a language. It has no power on its own. It doesn't mean anything in and of itself. I mean, Pluto is not something that you need to, give obeisance to because to pacify it in one way. And this is absolute nonsense. That's literally idolatry. That doesn't have any meaning. You know, you understand? So it's not. The planets don't do anything per se. They're like, I don't. When your spacecraft is falling towards the planet, or when your spacecraft goes into orbit around the Earth, do you worship the Earth or do you pay obeisance to the Earth to pacify the Earth in order to keep your ship in orbit? You don't. These things are not personal things. They're not, they don't care about what you think, really. You know, they're the structure of the instrumentation behind the psychological process of humankind. They're there whether you acknowledge them or not. Truth does not require belief. Doesn't matter what you think. You can tell yourself whatever you like. Belief is an act of will, you see. But the reason why people try to focus on the truth, to learn the truth, is because the truth empowers you. Because when you know, okay? And it empowers you, it affects you. So what I'm really saying here is that the energy of Pluto, once it has been triggered within the psyche, and it usually starts as some type of, you're struggling with something at a point where you cannot resolve it. You can't resolve it intellectually, you can't resolve it emotionally inside you. It needs to be externalized for it to play out. It is the result that emanates from the physical dynamics that plays out in front of you, what we call a crisis. It is in the process of that crisis that you can accept the result, because it always ends in some type of helplessness. And the helplessness is simply because you have refused to accept your own power, meaning that whenever points of contact have presented themselves, you have deferred your own power to another. And if that is not part of your psychological matrix, then your entire psyche erupts in confusion. And there's an aspect of you that is just as real as anything, as authentic and as true as anything. And it literally goes up in panic, as in, what's going on here? But it can't do anything because it's trapped within you. And then when a transit comes out, it lets rip, literally, bringing all sorts of devastation towards whatever and that's its way of, that's that aspect of yourself that is saying, hey, I'm here and you've been ignoring me for years. Okay, it's just you. And it's that part of you that literally says, um, maybe you've been shy, timid, or whatever. You've not been willing to claim your power. And like I said, power cannot be abused. The people who abuse power are powerless. They feel that powerlessness. That's what forces them into overdrive. They need to compensate for something. Power's mute. Doesn't say anything, doesn't need anything, doesn't do, it just goes on its own trajectory. It's not disturbed by anyone. Nobody disturbs it. It doesn't disturb anyone. But if you constantly have to prove that you are powerful, then obviously you're compensating for something. And when the energies of Pluto begin to go awry, then it begins to force this overwhelming urge to prove something. And those processes are processes of they are inauthentic processes within the psyche. And so when a transit comes along by progression or whatever, it just destroys all those things. You feel it could come in the form of an external enemy or group of enemies, but it is linked to what is going on inside. And so we must study the darkness, because everything that is formed before it is presented to the light, it is formed within the darkness, within the blackness. It is the blackness that creates. Okay? And when it creates, then it presents it to the light. After all, babies are formed within their parents' wombs, and then they are born through a birth canal. What do you think that process is? Just because you see it happening as a baby forming within the belly of them or the womb of their mother and then being born, you're looking at the entire same process. It's just for you to be able to accept it, it needs to come in a format that you can accept. Otherwise, you reject it. And that is the essential dilemma with Pluto. Because of the type of way we live our lives today and the type of societies that we have, Pluto is one of the first things to be rejected, to be suppressed. We literally teach children how to suppress this aspect of themselves because we don't know what to do with it. Our sexuality or deep sexual. That's why. I'm not saying that everybody should just be crazily sexual and whatever. No, that's also a compensation. Just because people have been suppressed for years, now they're just doing the opposite. The idea is this: once you pull a pendulum to one extreme and you release it, it immediately finds the other extreme. Because what nature is always trying to do is to bring everything into balance. So the pendulum keeps investigating extremes until the entire energy is dissipated and it finds itself in equilibrium, which is where it wants to be. Okay, so the same thing is because of the nature of millennia of suppressing this aspect of consciousness. Then when you release it, it immediately finds the other extremes. People go to the very other extreme of extreme sexuality. That's also an imbalance within the psyche. And then it keeps on vacillating between these two extremes until it finds the proper integration within the psyche, and then the psyche is balanced. Okay, no more obsessive compulsive desires. There's peace within the individual. Okay, now moving on. Pluto, due to its subterranean nature, has been associated with hidden wealth. This association comes from its affiliation with psychological and material death. In the early days of wealth creation and accumulation, gold was highly sought after as a mined resource. Wealthy mine owners exerted a tremendous influence on society and its leadership structure, hence the term plutocracy. No doubt, Pluto is power, but this power must necessarily be conferred by the collective social sphere onto the individual's unconscious awareness, predicated by the disposition of the moon in the natal chart. The solar focus cannot control Pluto's effects, but can only acknowledge its presence. Pluto's power cannot be adopted with force, as Pluto alone cannot dethrone Saturn. When individually wielded, those with strong Pluto themes become victims of their own machinations. They then experience the flip side of Pluto's power, powerlessness. For Pluto's power to be conferred on an individual with strong Pluto themes, the coiled serpent of Pluto's power within such individuals must be uncoiled for the benefit of the collective. This individual must raise and resolve the collective Pluto of the group through providing a means for the collective to dissipate their own pent-up sexual energy. Some constructive methods for achieving this are group healing and counseling, crisis management, medicine, law enforcement, grief counseling, scientific research, business extraction of mineral wealth, indeed every sphere of human activity where intensity, danger, courage, risk, and hyper-awareness convey advantage. The most potent Pluto contact in the natal chart is when it is conjunct both the moon and a water ascendant simultaneously. Commentary. Now, this is just my experience, I don't know what, maybe you have another experience of a Pluto contact that is extremely intense. But you see, in my experience, when Pluto conjuncts the ascendant, for instance, and then with the moon also conjunct the ascendant. Now, if you've ever come across such a person, wow, just wow. I mean, I don't know, I've only, I've come across a couple, but just wow, you know. I mean, Pluto accentuates anything that it touches. It basically empowers anything that it turns it into something else. It brings out something. What's the right word? It magnifies, but it's not like the magnification of Jupiter, which tries to inculcate as much experience of the world around us as possible into our psyche. Pluto is a different type of magnification. It's the magnification of intent. So it just magnifies the intent. So if already the planet is already in a bad situation or stressful, because there are no bad situations, but if it's already in a stressful situation whereby whatever the planet is involved, maybe a T-square or something, needs to be externalized for resolution. The addition of Pluto into the mix basically just it supercharges the situation so that the intensity is extremely hard to handle. These are very touchy people, very difficult to penetrate, very difficult to get to know. It's very difficult for them to let go. You see, their hurt can be very deep, but also their ability to love. And therein lies a double-edged sword with these contacts. You see, they're extremely sensitive people. That's the power of Pluto. the sensitivity goes so deep it reaches right into hell. But I've always told people that you cannot fire an arrow without pulling it back. In fact, how far it travels when it's released depends on how far you have pulled it back. You know, it is potential energy that gets converted into kinetic energy. Pluto is the potential energy within anything. So anything it touches, it gives this, so that when a release comes, you cannot go to heaven without going to hell. Yeah, it's really what it is. In fact, how high you rise depends on how far you can fall. Just human psychology. Okay, that's why people don't change until they are the precipice of some type of crisis or disaster. That's, for instance, a typical example is climate change. Everybody knows it's happening. People have known for quite a while. In fact, there are people who have known for maybe 100 years now that this is a potential. But nobody can stop climate. No, the nations cannot get together to stop climate change. It's going to happen, and the simple reason is because, it's the collective psychology of humankind is distorted. The entire value system is completely distorted. That's why you have nurses during the pandemic, nurses working 12-hour weeks, 12-hour days, 6 days a week, can't catch a break. How much do they earn? Doctors, how much do they earn? A footballer, an entertainer, kicks around the leather ball, makes 3 times what they make in a year. He makes it in a week. And that's not a highly paid footballer. I mean, the value system is, our value systems are whack because we consider things that are free and easy to be valueless. But the air we breathe falls into that category. And so we do not value it. We do not consider it as having any value whatsoever. Now, I'm not saying people should start attaching monetary values to the air. That's the same sickness, okay, being applied to air. You see? Okay, moving on, because this actually is a discussion about Pluto, not about these things. The only similarity between Pluto and Mars is their inclination to destroy. Mars destroys to wound because it enjoys combat. Pluto destroys to eliminate completely. However, once Pluto's power has been abused individually, the resulting blowback can be obliterating. Pluto is the power to renew, to regenerate, and to resurrect. It is the seed that must die to become the tree. Those who do not have alarming Pluto aspects or themes in their natal charts are not as aware of their sexual nature as those who do. A significant Pluto contact, either natally or through transit or progression, literally takes you to hell, where you must confront the untruths you have told yourself regarding your suppressed sexual desires. That's the end of the article, so I'm just going to close this out with a commentary. Now, what does it mean for one to become comfortable with their own darkness? Darkness doesn't connote evil. Darkness simply connotes something that is unseen. That's all. And believe me when I tell you, most of physical existence is unseen. You don't need to believe me. That's what your scientists are currently saying. Most of the physical universe is unseen. And people find this extraordinary. Scientists are saying that the baryonic matter in the universe is only about 4 to 5%. The rest of it is dark. And people are freaking out. I said, what is this? And I'm sitting now saying, but what did you expect? I'll give you a typical example. If you're listening to me right now, you're listening to me with your ears. You have no idea how they work. Somehow you're the one controlling your listening, your ability to listen. But you don't feel your ears working. You don't feel the bolts grinding, the nuts, the mechanisms of how these things come to be. You don't feel the mechanism of how your self-consciousness arises. Filtration is taking place with your blood, keeping you alive. Your liver is basically detoxifying your blood to keep you alive. Your brain is constructing a sense of I every moment of your wakeful self. You don't feel these things. Darkness is simply that which you're not aware of. That's all. Doesn't mean that it's not there. Doesn't mean it's evil. In fact, without it, there's nothing. You can't have the things that you have in the light. Where do you think the things in the light come from? They come from the darkness. So darkness is not evil. The entire concept of good and evil is just something that has been imposed by some type of thinking regarding the nature of duality. But if you understand that both of them are literally the same and they come from the same place, then all that duality melts away. Because at the end of the day, what is the individual trying to achieve? Every human being on this earth is here to achieve only one thing: the end of internal conflict. And that only happens when there's absolute acceptance of self. Self-awareness, the deepest type of self-awareness. If we live in a society that's constantly stirring the waters of conflict, thereby fragmenting the self into myriads, then what hope is there for that, the possibility of peace? Not just peace externally, peace internally. So the soul of every human being on this planet is massively disturbed. It's carrying that disturbance like a bag of bricks. It's really what it is. And I know people might think going to a nature reserve or going into the woods, it's a peaceful experience. Well, I'm here to tell you something. You don't know what peace really feels like. You have never felt it. The absence, the total absence of conflict. No human being on this planet can really say that they have felt it. I mean, some people have religious, mystical experiences where they say they have felt these things, but I'm extremely skeptical about these things. You see, because it requires a fundamental. If you found that kind of peace, this world will drive you mad. That's really what it is. If you literally want to disappear from everything. Why? Because it would be like living in hell. It would be torture. You couldn't integrate with what anybody was doing. You couldn't, it would be like, you'd be a complete and absolute recluse. I'm not saying every recluse has found peace, but you're going to have to judge for yourself. So that's the podcast on Pluto. It is a subterranean psychic experience. And if you've been through crisis in your life, or if you are someone who has Pluto or Scorpio or the 8th house very prominent in your natal chart, then you've become familiar with periodic crisis. And what is a crisis? A crisis is a confrontation. And what is the nature of a confrontation? When two immiscible things are forced to mix. So literally two aspects of self are forced to confront each other. Now, we can dissipate these clashes by forcing, even before the crisis erupts, by confronting these aspects of self, and that is the process of catharsis. That's the process of healing. And it would be great to actually find healing centers for the mind, for the psyche, popping up all over the place. You don't have to go to it. They don't have to be psychologists, just people that you can confront darkness with. People that make you feel safe enough so you can traverse your own darkness and then come out the other side totally healed and without any of the irrational fears and obsessive compulsive desires that plague a soul. Okay? And then you are free, you are released, and then you can go on to live your life and you can work towards the creation of an establishment of peace on earth. Because at the end of the day, life is a gift and a miracle that everyone's been given. It is literally a miracle that everyone's been given this opportunity to experience limitation, self-awareness. Yes, because where we come from originally, there's nothing limited about our experience. Our experience is all over. There's no separation or time or space or nothing like that. So when we come into this finite type of experience where we can enjoy the pleasure of limitation, the boundary of being a self, independent from other, the very possibility of having a thought in our heads that no other person is thinking, you don't realize what this is because you have forgotten. You see? You don't realize how extraordinary this is. To be a closed out self, an opaque self that nobody can look at, nobody can see. Wow. Think about this. There were no selves. You're not a self, meaning you don't even have an independent thought. You are nothing. So you're not a thing. You are always the collective. Always. There's no independent sense of I. And then you're born into a world that is finite, that mimics a kind of scenario where you can actually achieve some type of, you can create and work hard to create some type of bliss and then exist as a finite being in that bliss. Wow, this is true. It's amazing, literally. It's an experience, it's like paying for a cruise or something. But most of us don't remember. So it is what it is.